Hi, hello everybody. So I guess we're gonna get started now. No fancy bridges since we're using the voice over IP today instead of a normal conference line. If you have any problems hearing or anything else for that matter while you're experiencing the webinar, feel free to address those to me, Michael. Otherwise, Annetta, Melanie, and Mona will be handling the actual content of the webinar. You can feel free to type any questions you might have in the chat window at the bottom there of the screen at any point during the presentation. If you do have a microphone with your computer, where I'm going to open up microphone rights for everybody at the end of the session. So if you want to, you can ask questions that way, but you can always ask questions via the chat window. And so without further ado, I guess I'll hand it off to Melanie Gottlieb.
Thanks so much, Mike. So I think I know all of you, but I'm Melanie Gottlieb, Deputy Director of ACRO, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to join us in this private webinar conversation so that we can update you on our work with the Article 26 Backpack Consortium, which is led by the University of California, Davis in collaboration with ACRO and the American University of Beirut with funding from the Ford Foundation. A quick note on logistics before we get started. Unlike the way that we're doing things a little bit differently than we usually do at our webinars because this is an invitation only and a more intimate group. And so we will ask you to go ahead if you have questions during the presentation. Feel free to use the chat box, and I will be monitoring that chat box during the presentation. And that way we know if there's something logistic or urgent that needs to be asked. And then we will use that chat box questions, if your question hasn't been answered, to go ahead and call on folks to get started, and just in order to facilitate the passing of the mic. So on that note, we're going to get started. Today we have Annetta Stroud, who is the Associate Director of Training and Program Development here at ACRO, and Mona Finucane, Deputy Director of the Article 26 Backpack. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Annetta to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie, and thank you for all of you for being here with us today. And it is so nice to see such wonderful and friendly faces. What we would like to go over today is just to go ahead and give everyone an update on the Article 26 Backpack since we all met together at the ACRO Fall Symposium of September of last year. Things that we would like to inform the group about today is going to be giving just a brief history of what has happened since September in the fall of 2017 and where we are now, as well as the milestones that the project has been able to meet during that time frame. One of the things that we have been able to do in our milestones is we have been able to update our digital platform. We've developed a near-to-peer backpack guide training. We've incorporated a visual tool, which we have titled My Story, My Future, which is a very unique tool that actually brings to life the academic and professional achievements of the backpacker. And the other milestones that we have been able to meet has been our November field exercise, which we would also like to go ahead and give you an update for. Following that, we would like to talk about our upcoming deliverables and where we see the project going through 2019. And then we're going to go ahead and conclude with our conclusion and a general question and answer. And as Mike and Melanie have let us know, we will be actually opening up our group to speak through the mic and to just have a general conversation. So if you do have a microphone availability, please feel free to go ahead and utilize that when we have our conclusion and question and answer. And with that, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Mona to give us an overview of our history and our timeline.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you all for being here. So I'm just going to give a brief background and history of the backpack and walk you through the timeline that you can see on the screen now. So as Melanie said, the backpack is funded by the Ford Foundation. It came as a direct result of interactions between Dr. Keith Wattenpaugh, who's the head of the project, and refugees in the field over the past several years of research that he's done. Made to address the social and institutional barriers in the field that arise as refugees and vulnerable young people attempt to continue their educations or gain employment, the Article 26 backpack is a universal human rights tool that empowers academic and employment mobility. So imagine you're a young university student from Syria. You and your family have had to flee the war and flee violence. You're about to start down an unknown and difficult path, and you've been studying to go into medicine or engineering or teaching, and you want to keep going. So once you're in the safety of Lebanon or Jordan or Turkey or Greece, you try to reconnect with higher education, but now you face a whole new host of problems. Do you have an official transcript if you're a refugee and the university you attended is closed or has been destroyed? So having documents like this and sharing that information can be the difference between being able to reconnect with higher education and building a better future with your family, or just being left behind. So the backpack is designed to solve challenges like these for refugees and other populations of vulnerable young people by empowering them to best share with universities, scholarship agencies, and even employers their educational background, employment history, and goals. And since we last met in September, we were officially awarded the grant from the Ford Foundation, and so we were able to officially begin work. In November 2017, Team Backpack went to Lebanon for field exercises and research, which we will discuss a little bit later. And then in January of this year, the University of California, Davis web developers began the actual coding on the backpack platform itself. So in June, just in a little over a month, we will be heading to Lebanon, and we are going to enroll about 300 backpackers for the first phase of enrollment. And then by September, we will enroll an additional 300 to 500 backpackers, this time utilizing the Arabic functionality as well. And so thank you. And Aneta, on to you for the milestones.
Great, thank you, Mona. So again, going ahead and speaking to some of the milestones that the project has been able to meet since we did last see each other in September is that we really have done some very, very hard lifting for the digital platform. It was seen in our field exercise that there were limitations to our first version of our technical platform. So we took back our findings from the field, and we've now employed the actual Davis IT team to go ahead and build and host the digital platform for the backpack. In addition to the upgrades and updates to the digital platform, we also have implemented the backpack guide system, and we will be getting into more details as we move forward. Thirdly, we were able to also implement My Story, My Future, and we will show you a real example from our field exercise from Lebanon and show you a real My Story, My Future example from the field. And finally, we will talk about the different events that we held in Lebanon, in Beirut, and then also in the Bekaa Valley, where we were able to implement the first version of the backpack to determine the viability of the product in general. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back up to Mona to really give you some more detail about the strides that we've made for the digital platform.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Anita. So on your screen, you can see the first screenshot. That's my personal backpack. That's my map. And so the digital platform, we've made great progress thanks to the very hard work of the Davis IET development team. They've been coding nonstop pretty much since January, and now we have an almost totally functioning backpack platform. They're currently wrapping up the sharing capability, and once they're done with that, we'll have the first phase of the backpack complete. So the map is basically the dashboard. You can see there I have access to my education and portfolio and profile tabs, as well as ways to edit that. So there's just my basic information there, along with my display name in Arabic. And the next slide is my education page. You can see we list the level of education, the dates attended, the degree and the major, the country, all that good stuff there. The link there for diplomas and completion documents opens a new tab with either a PDF or a JPEG of the document, depending on how it was uploaded. There's no limit to the number of documents that a student, the backpacker, can upload, and you can also, as you can see there on the right side, continue to add schools. You don't have to have completed anything. You can, none of this information is mandatory. So we want the backpackers to be as safe as possible, to feel as safe as possible. And the next slide, this is the portfolio. This is where I would upload where I currently work, my job, my resume, any other relevant information, my story, my future video. This is the sort of the front-facing part of the backpack. And ultimately, once the sharing capability is done, I would be able to select specifically what I want to share and package into a share to send off to an admissions officer, an employer, someone writing me a letter of recommendation, whoever I feel whoever I feel needs to see my information. And with that, I'll turn it over to Annetta to talk about the backpack guide system training.
Excellent. So as you probably noticed, we do have some very major changes from the technology that we first started with to what we decided to utilize through the UT Davis system. And again, as you are aware from chatting with us about this topic and this project for a little bit of time, is that really this entire backpack is based on the idea that students and backpackers can have a safe and secure place that they can use to house their educational documentation, CVs, resumes, and our My Story, My Future. And so what is wonderful about this being hosted through University of California system is that the backpackers are going to have all of the same security rights that current UC students have. So we are really, really excited about the development that that Davis has decided, that the UC system has decided to take on this part of the project. So we are very excited about that. So thank you, Mona, for the overview for our platform technology. One of the other things that we are really excited about that we were able to implement in November was the backpack guide system. So in addition for the backpack to utilize a digital and secure cloud-based technology, the backpack team also realizes the importance of creating a very strong trust base between the backpacker and other potential backpackers. So in order to create the trust base between the technology and the possible user, the team has implemented what we have called the backpack guide system and training program. The driving concept of the backpack guide system is the idea of employment of near-peer young people from the actual host country to go ahead and to help serve from the host community and the refugee local communities to serve as backpack guides. The first cohort of guides was recruited primarily through the American University of Beirut School of Education at both the undergrad and the graduate levels. As backpack guides, they explain the way the backpack works in the field to potential users in the native language, including the safety and security elements. They also help the backpackers interact with the digital technology of the platform, and also generally interacting with this young refugee population to help answer some of the educational questions and also help explain what the backpack is and what the backpack is not. One of the most important functions of the guides is actually explaining the core rights of the backpacker through a discussion of the backpacker's Bill of Rights. This is actually a very important piece for us because this not only enables the backpack guides to speak to what the rights are as the user, but to do that in a safe environment and to be able, again, to answer some of these questions utilizing the native language. So in terms of, in preparation and the training of our backpack guides, we held a 3-hour training at the American University of Beirut, and we provided a training based on our backpack guide handbook. And this also includes the actual opening of their own backpacks with scenarios employed to help the guides answer questions that the backpackers may have specifically regarding security, use, and other features. Because again, one of the core concepts here with the backpack that does make it a unique technological platform is that this is in fact everything they put in there is theirs, and they can share it, but only if they want to and explicitly state that they can. Some of the key observations that we found when training our backpack guides and utilizing our backpack guide system is the idea that this is also helping provide an opportunity for civic engagement for the students. This also promotes good citizenship and public service. Really, we're also considering this as a key sustainability resource that will actually contribute to better and higher quality interaction between these students of the host country and refugees. What we do not want to do is create any type of stigma from use of the backpack itself. And one of the ways of doing that is to show that actual university students do open their own backpacks and are actually engaging with the technology itself. Again, one of the other drivers for this was being able to build that very important trust base between potential backpackers in the field. And this is really great because, again, even though we are utilizing a near-to-peer network of learning and engagement, and we do think that it is a fundamental piece of the overall success of the project. One of the things that was also a primary observation was that it is definitely necessary that we develop an Arabic language guide orientation, and we definitely still are working for different media and different resources to help support our training initiatives for our backpack guides to go into the field. It was really, from my perspective and from the perspective of other team members, the whole process of utilizing students to speak with other students in a refugee setting was unparalleled, and the guides took their responsibility incredibly seriously, and a lot of them had never been in a camp setting before and were really able to learn firsthand why we should not have stigma towards these populations. So I think that by utilizing near-to-peer individuals to help establish backpacks in the field, we are really working on not only the creation and supporting access for these populations, but also really supporting a different way of looking at the refugee populations within these host countries. And so we're actually very excited about being able to train and then employ more backpack guides when we go out and have our June field exercise. So I think all of us on the team are very proud of our backpack guides that we were able to recruit through the American University of Beirut. With that being said, I will go ahead and turn it back over to Mona to talk about another one of the really incredible one of the really incredible functions of the backpack, which is going to be My Story, My Future.
Thanks, Annetta. My Story, My Future is one of my favorite parts of the backpack. It's a very unique feature that sets the backpack apart from other cloud-based storage systems. My Story, My Future is a sort of visual personal statement, and we encourage backpackers to film and upload themselves talking about their lives and their stories. There's a specific place in the backpack platform for the My Story, My Future link to go. It's an important tool because it adds a human element to the backpack. Rather than just a dry collection of transcripts and official-looking documents, My Story, My Future humanizes the backpacker and allows for a full perspective on their lives and on their stories. Refugees face a stigma, like Anetta was saying, and we hope to help them overcome that stigma. And by personalizing their backpacks and giving their stories in depth and with a face to the name, we hope that we can overcome that and make this a more useful tool. Having the backpack tell his or her story in his or her own voice is an invaluable tool in humanizing them. We've included Jamal's My Story, My Future here, and that Mike will cue up in just a second. His story is very moving, but unfortunately it's not a unique story for people in his situation. So Mike, if you're ready, you can go ahead and play that video.
هذه قصتي وهذا مستقبلي. أنا اسمي جهاد قيسانية، من سوريا، من ريف دمشق، من الغوطة الشرقية. نشأت في عائلة متعلمة، درست للمرحلة الثانوية في مدارس سوريا، دخلت جامعة دمشق اختصاص كيمياء تطبيقية، درست للسنة الرابعة الفصل الثاني. بلشت الثورة في سوريا، اعتقلت لمدة 5 سنوات، وأنا بالسجن بلشت أدرس مستقبلي، أدرس إنه أنا بعد السجن. أول شيء كان عندي أمل كبير إنه أنا مستحيل ضل بالسجن، وإنه أنا طالع إن شاء الله، إنه أنا طالع. فالحمد لله رب العالمين طلعت من السجن، وأنا جوا عم بفكر كنت إنه شو بدي أسوي بعد ما أطلع، عم بخطط لمستقبلي. طلعت مباشرة، جيت على لبنان، شفت إنه أنا مفصول من جامعتي، ما فيني أرجع كفي بالجامعة، فاتجهت باتجاه التعليم. اتجاه التعليم لأنه وأنا عم فكر كنت إنه هو أفضل شيء لإعادة البناء، لإعادة الإعمار، إنه أنت تعلم جيل جديد وتبنيه من أول وجديد، لأنه هال7 سنين حرب دمرت كل شيء قاعدة تعليمية بسوريا. فاتجهت باتجاه جسور عم تعلم طلاب سوريين، مخيمات، كمان عندهم انقطاع عن المدرسة، مستويات مختلفة. وبالإضافة لجسور أنا عم درس بمركز ثاني، مرحلة إعدادية، كمان باختصاصي، بينما بجسور هو اختصاص معلم صف، أنا عم بلش معهم من أول وجديد، يعني من البداية. بينما بالمدرسة الثانية فأنا عم درس فيزياء وكيمياء للمرحلة الإعدادية، 7 8 9. اختصاصي بحبه كتير بحبه، لدرجة إنه بتصور كل شيء من حولي هو كيمياء، بتعامل معه على أساس كيمياء. بس في صعوبة كتير حتى يوم اجيت على لبنان إنه أرجع أكمل اختصاصي، لأنه ما معي إثبات إنه أنا بخلص هدول السنين بسوريا، بدهم يرجعوني من البداية. فوقفت شوي عند هالموضوع، وعم تابع بمجال تعليم الأطفال. فتعليم الأطفال بالنسبة لي هو كتير شيء حلو، يعني لأنه عم حس إنه أنا عم بإنجز شيء، عم قدم إنجاز، يعني إنه أنا عم علم هذا الولد اللي انقطع، ومو بس إنه ولد انقطع عن المدرسة، ولد عنده مشاكل نفسية بسبب الحرب، بسبب القصف، بسبب التهجير، بسبب حدا فقد من عائلته. فأنا يوم عم بتعامل مع هذا الشخص، فأنا عم بتعامل مع حالات خاصة استثنائية، مو مع أي طالب عنده الظروف المناسبة للتعلم. هدول الأطفال يعني عندهم أدنى الظروف لحتى يتعلم، فنحن عم نشتغل معهم لحتى نحصل أكبر درجة من التعليم بالنسبة لهم. هدفي المستقبلي، أنا حابب الهدف القريب يعني إنه خلص اختصاصي وحصل اختصاصي كامل. بس الهدف اللي أسمى من هيك إنه أنا حابب أرجع على سوريا وأرجع أطبق كل شيء تعلمته بلبنان، من تقنيات تعليم، من وسائل، من كل الاختصاصات اللي تعلمتها بلبنان، ارجع اطبقها، لنرجع نعمر من جديد، اول وجديد سوريا، نعمر هذا الجيل ونبني هذا الجيل اللي تدمر دمار كامل بسبب الحرب. فكل شيء تعلمته هون وكل شيء عم بتعلمه وحابب اتعلم زياده زياده لحتى ارجع بسوريا وبلش وعمر من اول وجديد ونبني سوريا جديده ان شاء الله.
It would appear everyone's still muted.
Thanks for playing that video, Mike. So yeah, that was Jamals' story. You can see how it's much more powerful than just having a collection of his transcripts and documents there. And so with that, I will send it back to Annetta, who will talk about our November field exercise in Beirut and the Bekaa Valley.
Great. Thank you both, Mona and Mike, for getting our video up and played. So yeah, as you can see, we are really excited about My Story, My Future, and we do absolutely think that it is a very, very unique piece of the backpack that, again, will help not only to give a face to the name, but really to humanize really some of the larger issues that we're dealing with when working with these populations. So in our November field exercise, we do want to give you guys a little bit of background about our experience and what we were doing there. So our backpack team went to Lebanon in November of 2017. We were engaged with various types of meetings. Primarily, we're going to focus on our November 13th meeting that we had in consultation with the Islam Affairs Institute of the American University of Beirut. And we'll then talk about our experiences in the field. We were able to simultaneously, on November 15th, actually go into the field. We broke ourselves up into 3 teams. We had one event where we opened backpacks at the American University of Beirut on campus. We also had a team travel to the central Bekaa Valley and go to the Jarahia Camp School. We also had a team go to the southern Bekaa Valley to the camp of Jebshanin. And so each one of us were on different teams. And so I would like to go ahead and start with discussing and giving you some background on the workshop and consultation that we had to kind of start off our November field exercise. So on November 13th, we did have a workshop and consultation at the Islam Affairs Institute of the American University of Beirut. We considered this a significant achievement of our fall exercise as it was jointly hosted again by AUB, ACRO, and University of Davis. We were able to bring together representatives from many universities in Lebanon, including American University of Beirut, the Lebanese American University, La Université Saint Yosef de Beirut, the Lebanese University, the Holy Spirit University of Kaslik, Balamad University, and the Lebanese International Universities. We thought this was actually pretty fantastic because there is some stigma between different institutes of higher education in Lebanon. So we were able to bring together very large stakeholders at the university level. In addition, we were able to and be gracious to have the presence of Dr. Ahmad Jamal, who is the Director General of Higher Education at MEHI, which is the Lebanese Ministry of Education and Higher Education. We were very excited to have him. This was not his first conversation around the backpack, as there has been a lot of back work done on the ground level by Dr. Wattenpaul leading up to our team event in Lebanon. He's a very interesting guy who holds the Director General of Higher Education position at MEHI. And one of the reasons that I find that is that he actually comes from a credential evaluation background. And so a lot of what we're speaking of in terms of access to higher education, when we may not have all of our documentation in order, and how we can be flexible with our admission requirements, he's absolutely supportive of this conversation from that perspective. So we did find that his presence was incredibly supportive of the project. In addition to representatives, again, from Lebanese universities and MEHI, we also invited relevant NGOs who work within the region, specifically in Lebanon. Some of the NGOs that participated included the Norwegian Refugee Council, HOPES, JSUR, Sombola, Laser, and then American University of Beirut's Civic Center for Community Engagement and Outreach. The way that we structured our workshop and consultation is we started the morning with an overview for the larger group about what the backpack is, what the backpack is not, and what the backpack aims to do, and how it can support access to higher education. After we had our overview and with the entire group, we went ahead and broke out into working groups. We divided the group into two main groups. The first one was the university group, represented by, as I went through the list of Lebanese universities, and the individuals from the universities really represented registrars and admissions officers. So we were very excited to have them participate in the university working group. In addition, we also had a group specifically to discuss the viability of the backpack from an NGO perspective. And so again, we were really excited to have the representation from the local NGOs who work in the camp settings to be there. Some of the findings that we came from, specifically from the university perspective, were, as you might imagine, they were a little critical, and they brought to light a couple of concerns that admissions and registrars at the institution will have. First of all, what we decided as a group is the platform needs to be open access and not just used by refugee and vulnerable populations. This is going to go back to speaking to what we don't want to do is create any type of stigma for individuals who use the backpack. Also, it was definitely determined that it is imperative that backpackers are aware that the backpack does not substitute, but rather supplements existing admissions protocols and requirements. The backpack is a tool to be used by the university to help support their informed admissions decisions. Another key finding is that we wanted to make sure from the university perspective that university participants understand the backpack is a document repository, and among its functions, among several of its functions in terms of sharing documentation, that this again does not replace the admissions process. And so when we are speaking to stakeholders at the university level, we also need to let them know that again, this backpack does not take the place of your current admissions processing and protocols. And the last key finding is that the backpack needs to incorporate more data collection to better inform document reconstruction efforts. And we will, when we speak to our future goals, we will be coming back to the actual assessment of academic records. Now, from the NGO perspective, there were definitely other concerns and conversations. Some of those were around the managing the expectations of the backpack to potential backpack users. And this was a common theme also, as I mentioned, with the university group. Another key finding was that the backpack needs to focus on improving access issues locally. Also, digital literacy and skills are going to vary greatly from individuals who are in these camp settings. And so this is absolutely why using trained backpack guides is going to be imperative when we implement this further in the field. And then the last key finding from the NGO group is that students need opportunities to actually plan their future, and the backpack may be a viable piece of technology to actually help them do this. And when we talk about the compass, we will come back to how the actual backpack will help inform the users of potential opportunities. So we would definitely say that the workshop that was hosted at the Islam Affairs Institute at AUB was definitely a success, and we learned a lot from the key constituents within Lebanon at the higher education level and also at the NGO level. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Mona so she can tell us about her actual implementation experience at the American University of Beirut.
Thanks, Annetta. We held our event at the American University of Beirut. We held it in a spare conference room. And we didn't have problems with any sort of Wi-Fi connectivity or using the actual app, which is an obvious perk of working in a place like a campus versus a refugee camp in a rural setting. And so our backpack guides were volunteer teachers from Jasur, the teaching organization, and the backpackers were Syrian refugee undergraduate students from various universities around Lebanon. And one of the first problems we dealt with was security. The AUB campus security stopped the backpackers at the gate and wouldn't let them in until we verified that we had invited them to campus. And so this speaks to a little bit of the stigma that Annetta had mentioned before, and is just something that we need to be aware of for future implementation events. Security and transportation of refugees around the country. And so we also realized that the Arabic component of the backpack is extremely, extremely important. The backpack guides were bilingual and were able to translate for the backpackers. But even though the backpackers were, college students, their Arab English was not as strong as we had anticipated or expected. And so we realized that the Arabic is going to be indispensable. And so that was another one of our key takeaways from that. The guides were, incredible at the event. They were able to translate. They were able to really explain what the backpack is. They were able to explain the limitations of the backpack. And they worked very well with the backpackers who had come from all over. And it was just a very interesting way to see the two populations also interact. And so the location was secure. We didn't have any issues with the Wi-Fi or the functionality. And in the future, we hope to have as many events, implementation events on actual college campuses. And with that, I will turn it over to Melanie, who will discuss her experience in the field.
Thank you, Mona. On November 15th, I attended with a small group to the southern Bekaa Valley to Jubjuni, which is a facility that is a Jusur elementary school. The Jubjuni school is operated by Jusur, a nonprofit social responsibility organization that's deeply involved in the region. The school is located near two large informal Syrian refugee settlements, and the school building itself is a converted paint factory with classrooms on 2 levels, a small library and multi-purpose room on the 2nd floor. The teachers at this facility are refugees themselves with a variety of professional backgrounds, few of which were actually teaching. Prior to beginning the exercises, we engaged in a lengthy discussion with these teachers who asked really important questions about the security and the safety of their documentation prior to agreeing to further cooperation. This was an important experience for us because these teachers were somewhat older backpackers. They were not university age. Most of them were post-university. Our explanations of the security and the utility were sufficient to convince.
Pardon me, Melanie.
Yeah.
Could you speak louder? For some reason, it's really low. I'm not exactly sure why.
Okay. I will try again. Can people hear me better now? I will hold the mic really close. So our explanations of the security were sufficient to convince the teachers to proceed, and they were very interested in opportunities to use the backpack and excited that this might help them to re-enter higher education or be retrained or re-enter their fields. It is important to note that in this exercise there was no personal data employed at all. Because it was a testing site, we did not use personal data in that backpack implementation. Also, due to the nature of the interactions that we had, our guides were not able to orient the backpackers as a group. They were able only to interact one-on-one with teachers as they became available during breaks. This was a different experience for the backpack guides, and I think it ended up being a very good experience for them. They got a little bit more intensive questioning because it was very one-on-one engagement. So our experience at Jib Janine pointed to the following. One, backpackers really need to receive very clear and proper preparation prior to opening the backpacks. And one of the strategies that we needed to explain is the security of cloud-based storage. The other lesson learned is that backpack events should never take place among people trying to do their jobs at the same time. And that really has some implications for us in terms of when we schedule backpack events in the future. So these observations have definitely informed backpack development and how we will structure and implement the next set of field exercises in June. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Anetta so that she can talk about her experience.
Great. Thank you, Melanie. I find it very interesting how just between the different locations there, we learned so many different lessons. Similarly to Melanie's experience in the field, I was also in the Bekaa Valley with my team. We were at the Jarahia Camp School where we were able to work with a small group of teachers, very similar to Melanie's experience in Jib Janine at the Jisor Elementary School. Our experience was a little bit different for reasons that I do feel are because our principal lead, Keith Wattenpaw, Dr. Wattenpaw, was able to develop personal relationships with the principal and the head of the school in the camp prior to us going to implement the technology in the school itself. So I do believe that having prior engagement with potential populations, and specifically in this case in Jarahia, was definitely positive, possibly not replicatable, but definitely positive. We unfortunately we did come to find that there were certain limitations when working in this type of camp environment. We did not have sustainable electricity throughout our day of opening backpacks there, which, if you can imagine how electricity is necessary to access a cloud-based technology, you might understand how that would be considered a very large limitation of the technology itself. However, that being said, we were able to still open up simulated accounts and also start working on the implementation of My Story, My Future. And I do think, again, that this was a very successful component of what we were able to do in Jarahia. Our guides that we had two young women, and you will see their pictures there holding the graphic novel that has been developed at University of California, Davis to show really how the backpack works. They were instrumental in actually being able to discuss on a level that was understood by the teachers within the school how and why this could be something, this could be a tool for them. We did have very, very positive reception from the individuals that we worked with, and we were able to open I believe about 7 simulated backpacks. Now, again, we did have a lot of lessons learned, and we did definitely see in the field how these limitations are going to affect further and future implementation. Key observations and findings are really going to be that orientating backpackers as a group is actually efficient and effective. Now, this is a little bit different for us than Melanie's experience because we actually were able to work with individuals while they were not working and while they were not having other responsibilities to the school itself. So we were able to do our primary orientation as a larger group. We did employ the graphic novel to help explain what the backpack is and how it's used. Although it was decided that a small little graphic novel may not be the best way of showing this information and that other digital and analog infographics should be developed. And again, the largest limitation that we did find in the field was leading back to the lack of primary resources that one would need to be able to access any type of online platform. And we have decided that an offline backpack opening and filling process should definitely be developed down the road, along with, as Mona and Melanie mentioned, having an Arabic language platform is also going to be key moving forward. So this is definitely, it was a productive field experience and implementation from all 3 of our activities that we were doing there in our different locations. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mona so we can go ahead and talk about our upcoming deliverables for the next rest of the year, basically. We're going to go ahead and speak to the compass. We're going to go ahead and talk about the educational assessment platform, as well as our goals for our spring and fall implementation. So I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Thanks, Annetta. So we'll be done with the first phase of coding this week. And after that, we are focusing on the compass. So the compass is the interface that connects the backpacker to their future and the resources that will help them achieve their goals. Ultimately, the compass will be the portal for the backpacker to access scholarship resources, specifically with IIE's peer network. We're hoping to partner with them, possible counseling services, and any other services that we may include with partnerships with various NGOs. And this is obviously still a work in progress that we're still really feeling out, but that is the ultimate goal with that. Additionally, the compass will connect the backpacker to the credential cloud. So once the backpacker has finished, completed their educational profile and uploaded their documents, they can request an assessment of their educational documents through the platform. And so this request would trigger a workflow that would determine their eligibility and assign that assessment request to an available evaluator in the cloud, which is something that Annetta will go into a little more detail right now. Annetta?
Great, thanks, Mona. So yes, in addition to the functionality of the compass to directly put the backpacker in touch with other possible educational and possible employment possibilities, the compass actually is going to be the piece of the platform that will allow the backpacker to initiate an assessment of their educational documentation. The compass is again the interface that is going to allow the backpacker to have an overall place to go for resources. Once they have completed their educational profile and have uploaded some type of educational documentation, they can then request an assessment of their educational documents through the platform. The request is going to trigger a workflow that will determine the backpacker eligibility to actually have educational records assessed, and then also that this will then be assigned to a possible assessment / evaluator who is part of our credential cloud, who has the appropriate geographic and or discipline expertise. So this is definitely part of our next phase of development, which we are also very excited about, and we do want to see this ready for possible fall implementation. So speaking to our implementation goals for spring, in June we will be spending 17 days in Lebanon, and we will be going around to different parts of Lebanon to work with different refugee populations, and we are looking to open up 300 backpacks at that time, again, over that 17-day period. In September, for our fall implementation, we are really hoping to scale this up. We are really hoping to take all of our lessons learned, to have contributed and to have beefed up our guide orientation materials, our trainings, and to have specific social services and academic counseling referral processes, as well as making sure that we have the hardware to go ahead and meet our goal of 500 additional backpacks. And again, we are hoping to have the back-end platform for documentation assessment ready at that time. Again, this is going to be dependent on additional funding for the project that we are actively engaged on or coming to fruition. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Melanie to give our conclusion and open it up to a general question and answer.
Thank you so much, Annetta and Mona. If you have any, I didn't see any questions that came up in the chat box. And so what I would like to just remind you is that we do have, while you're thinking about your questions, that we do have a webinar tomorrow that will touch on this issue and other issues on inclusion and access to higher education for displaced and vulnerable persons. I am going to...
Melanie, can you hold the mic closer again?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, sorry.
That's...
Is that better? Okay. I have to hold it. So I'm going to put that link for the webinar in the chat box for anyone who might be interested. Just be aware that right now you may have noticed that ACRO has a new website that went live last week, and for some reason the webinar registration pages are not working. So you will need to use this direct link. I believe that Mike Sisson has also emailed it to you all, so you will have it. So with that, Mike, if you can open up the microphone for any questions people might have, that would be great. If you have a question and it starts to get a little loud, go ahead and sort of make a note in the chat box, and I'll make sure that the mic gets passed to you. Does anyone have any questions for the team? So I don't hear anything. You can go ahead and type your questions and I will read them. I see some folks are typing, so let's give them just
Hi, this is Annetta. I just want to quickly recap one thing that Melanie was referring to, and that is going to be, we do have an additional webinar tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m. EDT, East Coast time, where we will be talking about inclusion and access for vulnerable and displaced populations. This webinar is going to be delivered in conjunction with IIE's Catherine Miller, who's a senior program officer for the Peer Project, myself, as well as Stacy Bernhardt, who is senior director for the School of Business at Florida International University. So if anyone is interested in learning about current university initiatives, student-led initiatives, and other international initiatives that are currently happening within the space, we would definitely like to invite you to join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, that was the link that Melanie sent around to us and that Mike did as well.
I see a question. I'm going to direct this first to Mona, and then Annetta may have something to add. From Christopher Adams, can you touch on the intended audience a bit more? Is this primarily going to be geared towards those who attend events, or will anyone be able to create a backpack? If the latter, what steps are being taken to vet applicants?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are vetting applicants. It's currently by invitation only. We have created a referral checklist that we will be distributing to NGOs around the region to help sort of vet and pre-select the pool of backpackers. And so this includes, basic things like, do you have an email address? Do you have images or copies of your transcripts ready? Have you thought about your future and what your next steps may or may not be? And so that will help us sort of initially pre-sort the students, the backpackers. Also, for the spring implementation, the American University of Beirut is going to have sort of an open rolling enrollment versus a more structured enrollment event like we'll be having in the various camps when we go in June. And so those students will also be pre-selected, but it will be a little looser in terms of the event there. We'll have probably a grad student who trained as a guide to enroll people on a day-to-day basis, 1 or 2 students there. So right now, it's only people who will be coming to the event who will be pre-selected by the NGOs and who meet certain requirements on a checklist who will be able to sign up for it initially.
Thank you, Mona. It looks like a couple of other people are typing, so we're going to give them a moment or two. Annetta, do you have anything to add to Mona's answer while we're waiting?
Thank you, Melanie. Maybe just that what we really want to see with the backpack is we would like for this to be a tool that anyone can use, not just vulnerable populations per se. We want to make sure that there is absolutely no stigma attached for using the backpack. Ideally, we want everyone to have a backpack. And we are hopeful that we will be able to create buy-in from the University of California system to even see how we can do this domestically as well. So in the larger picture, everybody should have a backpack.
Yeah, that's a great point, Annetta. I have a backpack. Keith has a backpack, and this is the reason that the guides all have backpacks as well, not only for them to become familiar with the backpack and the platform itself, but also to demonstrate to the backpackers that they're also utilizing the tool and it's not just for refugees.
Thank you, Mona. I'm going to ask a question here from Denise Jillians. who would like to know, can you talk more about what it means to trigger a workflow to determine eligibility? Who determines eligibility? Does it have anything to do with document status? And I don't know. Annetta, do you want to take that? I could take that. How you want to do that?
Sure, I can go ahead and speak to that briefly, and then Melanie, if there's anything additional that you would like to add, that would be great. So in terms of having their document assessed and the eligibility criteria for that, specifically in the beginning of this project when we do implement this functionality, is that first of all, we do want to make sure that the backpacker has thought about re-entering or accessing higher education in general. They do need to have put some time with the backpack to go ahead and give us their complete educational chronology along with any type of documentation, and really then showing that they do have interest and to show evidence of intent to re-access or access higher education. So that's going to be one criteria. A second is that we want to make sure that they have thought about a specific subject of study, has identified possible institution, and has reviewed and learned about possible support avenues either through DAFI, through peer, etc. So we really do want to make sure that the backpacker has shown some intent, again, of accessing higher education. Now, in terms of documentation, the first eligibility criteria that we need to work with is going to be having some type of document that somebody will look at. Unfortunately, as most of you know who are professionals in this field, it's pretty much impossible to evaluate an educational history and achievements without any documentation. So what we are looking for is at least one piece of documentation that can be assessed. Now, even this is going to represent completion of secondary, upper secondary. That's absolutely okay, but we are looking for at least one piece of educational documentation that can be assessed. And so really that is the key criteria that we're looking for initially when working with the platform when we have built that piece. Melanie, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, the only thing I would add is that when we talk about triggering a workflow, the backpack, the compass piece is designed in order to facilitate efficient assignment of assessments. And so pre-programmed in is that rubric for assessment with the ability of some human interface as well to review some things when necessary. So we are anticipating the possibility of a larger scaling up and need to be able to determine at least some automation of assignment in order to facilitate ease of access and speed of delivery of the assessment. I'm sorry, can you hear me, folks? There we go. I'd like to direct your attention to the chat box where Mona has posted Facebook, Twitter, and the Backpack webpage so that you can follow the activities during the implementations and as we develop further in the product. And so those links are listed below in the chat box. I have another follow-up question from Denise that says, what guarantee do you have that the end user institution will accept the assessment done? It is unclear at what point the documentation is verified as bona fide. Is this the key? This is the key barrier for institutions. Who determines this? It seems that by uploading, there is an expectation that an assessment will/can be done. Another, do you want to start with that and then I can follow up, or would you like me to take that first?
Sure, I can go ahead and speak to this briefly, and then Melanie, if you want to go ahead and touch on anything that I've missed in more detail, that would be great. So first of all, one of the key areas of teaching about the backpack to our backpackers is to let them know what the backpack can and cannot do. Again, one of the key pieces about this is that this is a tool for institutions to use to help make an informed admissions decision. And really what we're saying is that from this backpack, you can, as an admissions officer, trust that this is coming from, that this recommendation of assessment is coming from a group of highly trained professionals within our field. And it doesn't mean that the institution will honor the recommendations because, again, especially in the United States, we do not have any type of mutual recognition scheme. And so, again, autonomy is a hallmark of our HEI system in general. So there are absolutely no guarantees. This is also going to be the same within the country of Lebanon and other host countries as well. But one of the things that we are actively doing and engaging with HEIs within the host country is to develop primary stakeholders within the registrars and the admissions officers. We do want to show that these assessments are based on best practices of the field, and there will be times when we will be able to verify, for example, baccalaureate results. We may not have an official documentation, but if if an individual has a photograph on their cell phone of their BOC, they can upload it, and we as professionals working in this space have the tools to go ahead and verify those results are accurate. So I do feel that there is going to be definite use for this as a tool for admissions officers. And again, creating the buy-in from the institutions is absolutely going to be paramount in the viability of the backpack itself. Melanie, would you like to add to that?
Certainly. I would just like to add a couple of things, and I will address at the same time. Christopher Adams has asked the question, does UC Davis have a published policy related to accepting the backpack, or is there other institutional precedent? So I will say first that there is no other institutional precedent just yet because we have not yet produced an assessment. Those assessments are planned for the next phase of the backpack launch. And so that will be something that we will be working on. That said, we did have affirmative response from the universities in the region that were they able to use documentation in the backpack that were assessed as verified, that they would absolutely use that as documentation. Our goal with these assessments is to support the initial step of entry and the initial assessment. It's not going to replace a full, in the case of a U.S.-based student, a full credential evaluation, or in the case of a student who is going to Europe or going to attend education in Lebanon, it's not going to replace the governmental processes that are required for university admission. That said, our work with the Ministry of Higher Education in Lebanon and our meetings that we have had with the credential team there tells us that these assessments would be welcome additions to their admissions toolkit. So I am going to remind everyone we can stay on if there are still more questions, but I also just want to note that it is 3:11. I do see a couple of people still typing, and so we're happy to take those questions if you have them. And people have stopped typing. Oh, multiple people are typing. So we're going to give people just another minute or two to finish up their questions. We have a comment from Denise Jillians. We find that many refugees can obtain original documents. Is it the intent to bypass the usual process? For example, where original documentation is required and obtainable. If anyone can get a backpack, what does that mean?
I'll go ahead and speak to that. This is Annetta again. So this is a really, really good question. And so just for the first piece of this, is it the intent to bypass the usual process? No. And sometimes individuals who are in a camp setting are not able to get original documentation from the institutions because of political affiliation. And this is something that the backpack is really trying to do, to be a safekeeping for people who are not able to get their original documentation because of political affiliations. For example, Jamal, because of his status within the state, will not be able to access his documentation under the current government of Syria, for example. So that would be one instance where he will not be able to get that. So no, we are not trying to bypass any usual process, but there will be times when admissions officers should consider some type of flexibility when determining admissibility. And what the backpack hopes to provide, again, is a safekeeping mechanism for all of their personal history and academic achievements, and when possible, to have those documents assessed, even if they are not able to receive the originals. And again, so no, we are not trying to circumvent the usual process. We are just trying to give additional tools for those individuals who definitely will not be able to get their documentation. And again, this is the first step in this, and again, we do see this being a larger tool for a larger group of individuals. One of the things that we have also talked about is that we would like to be able to have secure documents sent through, for example, the clearinghouse into the backpack. So we are looking in the future to have different ways of even uploading what we would consider to be official documentation. And again, I think that with the current state of technology and digital student records, I think that it'll be interesting how a tool like the backpack will be able to work within that space. So I think that those are really great questions, Denise, and it's definitely something we've thought about. But absolutely, when students are able to get their original documentation, that will be requested from the institution. And again, this is just going to be used as a tool for those admissions and registrar's officers. And Mona or Melanie, if you would like to add anything to that.
I will scoop up the next question just a little bit while I add to that. In that Annetta is absolutely right. There is not an intent to replace current processes. It is merely a tool to support current processes and to speed current processes. In addition, this project connects in a large way with a movement that is happening globally around the convergence and the connection of student data mobility networks. And so as this project continues to develop, we have every expectation that we will be able to hook into other projects that are similarly engaged. Through the Groningen Declaration Network, for example. As far as questions around employers, we have not yet tested anything with employers yet, specifically those in the U.S., But that is something that we could look at as in a future rollout, as we start to look at where we might do rollouts here in the U.S. with refugee centers. And Stacy, I do agree that any opportunity to help recreate the educational history is absolutely helpful. And that is a piece of the goal of the backpack, is to help the student recreate their history, and to only have to do that one time through a portal that will be accepted by universities or credential evaluators or other professional organizations or scholarship agencies. And so as we continue to develop this, we feel quite strongly that this will be a useful tool and will help the work that we all do in this area.
Thanks, Melanie. This is Mona. I'd like to touch on Denise's a point of her question. If anybody can get a backpack, what does that mean? We'd also like to frame the backpack within the larger context of higher education within emergencies. And Keith, Dr. Wanpa, went to a conference in Lisbon earlier this month specifically on that topic. And we've had some discussion, very, very preliminary discussion here at UC Davis about utilizing the backpack also for DACA students. And so when we say, everybody can get a backpack, not only people who are fleeing war zones or who have their immigration status questioned or who are dealing, with a natural disaster or anything like that, but just it's important to note that anything can happen to any of us at any time. And so ultimately, the larger goal of the backpack is to ensure that we can safely and securely hold on to these documents that are extremely important that we may not be able to grab, if we have a serious flooding institution or our immigration status is called into question.
Thank you, Mona. That's fantastic. I see one more question. I see two more questions. So the next question is from Christopher Adams. Are you able to touch on the methodology behind recreating a student's educational history if necessary? Annetta, do you want to talk a little bit about framework for flexibility kind of conversation?
Sure, absolutely. One of the things that was one of our goals last fall when we had the symposium is to really start looking at what other credential evaluation professionals and other countries who do utilize a mutual recognition system, what are their best practices and what are the overlaps, what are the synergies, what are the differences in how we approach this depending on what our governmental structure is, if you will. For example, we have compiled, basically we have done all of our research into, for example, Denise, what you are able to do at WES and the similarities about how WES in Canada has looked at documentation, best practices on reconstruction from your perspective, and best practices in reconstruction from the European perspective. And really looking at what other U.S.-based credential evaluation professionals have been doing as well. And of course, with our fall symposium, we did have SACWA, which is the South African Qualifications Authority, represented as well, because as you know, the second largest, second largest now outside of Bangladesh is in Kenya. And so definitely getting a global perspective about best practices on reconstruction is one thing that we are absolutely doing. There are going to be differences depending on what the assessments actually do in the country, if they're legally binding documents or if they are recommendations, as we use here in the States. So we are definitely working on building a best practices to flexibility when working with incomplete documentation, as well as best practices when doing reconstruction. And Denise, as we have seen from both the project that you have led with West Canada along with CSIC and what NOCUT has been doing along with, Italian's academic past, there are a lot of overlaps, and it is definitely highly, it uses a lot of resources, the whole construction piece. So we're definitely looking at what the best practices are, not only from the North American context, but from other regional contexts as well. And again, the goal is to build a set of best practices that we will follow when working with incomplete document assessment. Hopefully that answered part of that.
Thank you very much. So we are closing in at 3:22, and I just want to give people a time check. It looks like we're hearing from Alex, who hasn't asked a question yet. Maybe not. So perhaps we will use this pause to come to a close, but I would like to invite all of you here to engage with us further. If you have further questions, please reach out to either Annetta or myself or Mona, and we will happily try to answer your questions and find the places where you can engage with us in this work. And we will pledge to keep you informed as we move forward in the progress of the Article 26 backpack. This webinar has been recorded, and we would absolutely invite you to share this if you would like to. So let us know and we can share it. And those folks who missed today, there were a couple who had planned to come and were unable at the last minute. We will be sharing that as well. After our exercises in June, we will again report out to this group to share with you our activities, and we hope that as you engage in your work with vulnerable persons, that you will share those activities with us as well, because it is through this sort of collaboration that we're going to be able to make sure that we are providing the best services to these students and to these vulnerable persons. So thank you very much for all of your interest, for your comments, for your questions, because each time we have a conversation, the project gets better and better. So thank you all very much, and I think we will at this sign off.